And welcome everybody. Justice is a process here, and we are here today. We're going to do a little trial watching. We're getting a little bit of a late start on the morning session of day 2 of State of Georgia versus Teresa Black. I'll give you a little bit of background. You can also see the ticker down below. Gives you a little bit of background on this case. Opening statements started yesterday. We'll cover that in a different video. I've already watched them. I watched day 1. Wasn't able to be home and in studio for that, but we're going to do some watching of the opening stages of today's court session. But essentially, this is a 20-year-old case where a mother is accused of unaliving her young son, and she's being accused essentially of being a neglectful parent and having administered medication in a neglectful way. And then having caused the death of her son, and then having left her son in a wooded area and basically then forgot about him for 20 years. Sad case, but we're going to get into it. We're going to start watching it. Day 1, obviously opening statements came in. Defense's side is she's not a neglectful parent. She is somebody who comes from in a difficult economic situation, and basically, her son got sick. She was administering medication in a normal way. They fell asleep, and overnight he passed away. And she spent a couple of days with him in this wooded area where they would try to sleep or find a sleep to be out of the way so they're not bothered when they're sleeping. Essentially concluded he was dead, wasn't going to wake up, and she essentially made the decision to leave him there. This is a time when she had no access to cell phones or anything like that. That's 20 years ago. And essentially makes the horrible decision to just move on. Goes on, continues living her life, has another child 3 years after this, and raises her, and goes on until a Good Samaritan who we heard from yesterday, a friend of hers who had grown attached to her young son, saw a rendering of what they believed was the child that had been found in this wooded area and was sitting in a cold case drawer down in Georgia. And eventually it led to the investigation that led to her being questioned and then being arrested. And here we are today with her on trial. So with that background, we're going to jump into the courtroom here. Let's get into the courtroom. And we're going to go ahead and get this started here. This is we're going to watch it at about 2 times speed. Hopefully everybody's okay with that. Leave feedback in the comments if it's too fast for you. I will slow it down if it's hard to understand sometimes due to audio issues in the courtroom. It can be, I'll drop it back to 1.5 until we get to live. So let's get started, guys.
I think we could potentially have Dr. Jackson testify, and the court would be able to make a decision at that point as well, so we can address that.
All right, well, let me just hear from him, and I'll decide if I think I need any more information or not. I'm sorry? Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, sure.
Your Honor, he's in the register.
Okay. And I understand, Ms. Hunter, that you sent a study or a journal to Ms. Milby. I need for you to resend it with the relevant portions highlighted, because it's a fairly lengthy article, and I only want to focus on the areas that I need to focus on. We can print it out if you want, and you can.
I don't have it highlighted that. I can have it over lunch break.
Can you direct us to the portions that are relevant? Do you know which pages or paragraphs? You don't. Okay.
No, no.
All right. Okay. please.
Raise your right hand. You swear to affirm the testimony to the court, be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
State and spell your name for the court, please.
George F. Jackson, Jackson.
All right, go ahead, Jackson.
Good morning, Dr. Jackson.
Good morning.
Dr. Jackson, where are you currently employed?
I am currently employed with the State of New Jersey Office of the State Chief Medical Examiner. My role is as a Executive Director of Laboratories, as well as the Chief Forensic Toxicologist for the State of New Jersey.
Yeah, I know it's awkward, but yeah.
And how long have you served as chief toxicologist for the New Jersey State Toxicology Laboratory?
Since December of 1999. No, 2019.
Okay. Do you recall where you served prior to your position as chief toxicologist of New Jersey State Toxicology Laboratory?
Yes, I do. I was working with the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System as a forensic toxicologist, and before that, I was working at a lab diagnostics laboratory.
And what role did you serve there?
As a forensic toxicologist.
And do you, in reference to your professional experience, your education experience, do you have a curriculum CD?
Yes, I do.
Can I approach this time? Yes. I want to show you, just for your own reflection, a copy of your CD. So you said that you served in the Armed Forces as a medical examiner. How long did you serve the Armed Forces as a medical examiner as a forensic toxicologist?
Yes, I worked there from April 20th, 2014 to December of 2019.
And were your duties essentially the same at the Armed Forces Medical Examiner Office as they are with the New Jersey State Toxicology Lab, minus the additional chief work?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and you also stated that you worked at the Atlantic Diagnostic Laboratory, and you served there as the Director of Forensic Toxicology. Is that essentially your role at the Atlantic Diagnostic Laboratory is essentially the same as your role at the Armed Forces Medical Examiner and the New Jersey State Toxicology Laboratory?
Correct.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. For purposes of this hearing, are you willing to stipulate to his qualifications as an expert?
And Your Honor, I
Okay.
think it's important the court understands his expertise.
Yes.
But I can answer the other next.
Okay. So we can, I don't doubt his qualifications and any of that. Just because we have a limited time, so I want to.
Dr. Jackson, how long have you practiced in the field of forensic toxicology? And you have your CV in front of you.
Right from 1980 to currently. Yes, I'm seasoned, so to speak.
All right, and can you inform this court what type of educational background you have?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in biology and science from Morgan State University, master's degree from Medical College of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, in pathology, PhD from Medical College of Virginia in pathology. I also have certification as a fellow of American Board of Forensic Toxicology. I'm also a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Science. I also have certification as a National Registry of Clinical Chemistry as a toxicological chemist. I have several licenses, one for the State of New Jersey as a laboratory director, one in New Jersey from the Medical Examiner as a bioanalytical laboratory director. I have published in the field and in peer-reviewed journals. I have testified on local, state, federal, military, even cases overseas, equally for the prosecution as well as the defense.
Have you received any honors in the field of toxicology?
I think I have.
Page 7. Page 7 of your CV.
Smith Klein Bryant Award for Scientific Research. I received the Graduate Fellowship. I also was awarded with the National NIDA Post-Doctoral Fellowship and a CPDD Travel Award for my research.
I think I have a pretty good understanding of his background and his training and experience. All right, let's move on from there.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, you stated that you have served since the 80s as a toxicologist. Specifically, you serve as a forensic toxicologist. Can you explain to the jury, to the court, what is forensic toxicology?
Yes, toxicology is the study of the effects of many xenobiotics on living organisms.
Just speak directly in the mic.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you get that? Okay. Toxicology is the study of adverse effects of chemicals or xenobiotics on living organisms. Forensic toxicology is the application of the field of toxicology to medical legal issues, such as the issues before the court today.
Is there a difference when you speak on forensic toxicology in reference to living organisms or deceased organisms?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, when talking about forensic toxicology, are you talking about organisms that may have been living or organisms that may have are no longer living?
Well, both. Forensic toxicology, you may find forensic toxicology in the field of drug influence. Of course, individuals are alive at that point, and also in post-mortem cases where the individual has passed on.
In your current role and in your role back in 1999, did you deal with organisms that were post-mortem as well as organisms that were living?
Back in 1999, I was doing both. I actually worked, I did clinical toxicology as well as forensic toxicology.
So I want to direct you back to 1999. During that time frame, what organization or company were you working for?
At that time, I was employed by National Medical Service in Wool Grove, Pennsylvania.
And were you employed there as a forensic toxicologist?
Yes, I was.
And can you explain to the jury what did you do while working at the National Medical Services?
Well, I had a number of duties, but one of the duties was to oversee the analysis and provide interpretation to our clients concerning post-mortem toxicology as well as clinical toxicology.
And what is the difference between clinical toxicology and post-mortem toxicology?
Good question, Counselor. Post-mortem toxicology deals with the field of toxicology and individuals who have died. In clinical toxicology, we're dealing with living people. We're dealing with analysis of many different drugs in living people and providing interpretation to our clients, generally a clinician. In post-mortem toxicology, we're providing information to the medical examiner.
And so I want to direct you to a specific case that you did in 1999.
Yeah, yes.
purpose of this motion hearing, I'm holding State's Exhibit 1. Dr. Jackson, can you please tell the court what is depicted in State's Exhibit 1?
You've handed me a copy of a National Medical Service Laboratory toxicology report that was issued to the Office of the Medical Examiner in this county.
Is this a report that contains findings of samples that you tested?
That is correct.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the report that was drafted in reference to a case to which you tested for the Office of the Medical Examiner in DeKalb County back in 1999?
That is correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to tender Exhibit 1 for the purpose of this hearing.
Exhibit 1, and do we already have Exhibit 1?
Well, that's what I said, for the purpose of this hearing. I didn't know if it should have different.
Label it.
We can distinguish need one or 7021.
Oh, 702 there.
702-1, okay, that's fine. Any objection to that?
Okay.
All right.
All right, so I want to speak with you about the NMS control number. What is that?
That each sample that comes into the laboratory is given a unique identifier number. And in this particular case, the unique identifier number is 313364.
And the toxicology report and there's a number that is stated, that is depicted on this paper after that statement. Do you know what that number refers to?
Yes, this would be our client's identifier number.
So can you tell us what is the process by which specimens are brought to the National Medical Services when they come from out of state?
They come by courier, or they can be delivered personally by an agency. They're received in a secure specimen receiving area with limited access. The specimens never leave that area. The specimens are inspected. They are assigned a unique identifier number. The paperwork is forwarded to a toxicologist. In this case, it was me.
And so what were you asked to examine for this case?
We received at National Medical Service a portion of skeletal muscle.
And how many samples did you receive?
We received two samples of skeletal muscle.
And what were you asked to test in reference? What were you asked to perform on those skeletal muscle samples that you received?
We were asked to determine, analyze for any type of xenobiotic or drug in skeletal muscle.
And were you asked to test just therapeutic drugs or illicit drugs or both?
In this type of analysis, we look for everything. So both therapeutic and illicit drugs.
So what type of procedures or tests did you use to determine what kind of drugs may have been found within these samples?
We used a variety of tests. The most definitive test that we used was gas chromatography, mass spectrometry.
And so when you performed the gas chromatography test and the mass spectrometry, what were your findings in this case?
Upon the findings, what we found was acetaminophen. We found diphenhydramine and metabolite for diphenhydramine.
All right. And how long, can you walk me through the process by which you go through in order to obtain these results once you actually complete these tests? What does it entail?
Can we skip back the process and just get to the gist of it for purposes of this hearing only?
Okay. All right. All right, so I want to talk to you about that. Let's first address that acetaminophen that was found in the samples. How much acetaminophen was found?
93 micrograms per gram.
And how much diphenhydramine was found in the samples?
Approximately 2,000 nanograms per gram.
The Benadryl portion,
Yes,
is that right?
that's
How much was that?
Approximately 2,000 nanograms per gram.
Right. And then you stated that there was a diphenhydramine metabolite present. What does that mean?
We found the metabolic. Let me backtrack a little bit. When you take a drug into your body, anything into your body, it gets absorbed, it gets distributed throughout the whole body, and it gets metabolized. It gets broken down to something that the body will excrete. That's elimination. So it indicates that diphenhydramine was metabolized.
And then also, your findings also stated that diphenhydramine was also inside the body that wasn't metabolized. Inside of the sample that wasn't metabolized.
Yeah, so we found parent compound, and we found the metabolite as well in skeletal muscle.
Understood.
Other than these findings, was there anything else of significance that was found within these samples?
No.
The presence of acetaminophen and diphenhydramine in skeletal muscle, can you tell us when those substances were ingested into this sample?
Given the nature of the specimen and the history, I cannot say with scientific certainty when this individual was exposed to diphenhydramine and acetaminophen.
Can you tell this court whether or not it was exposed before death, after death? Is that a finding you can make?
Yes, I can, because we actually found it in the skeletal muscle. The exposure was before death.
All right, and are you able to determine whether or not the 93 micrograms of acetaminophen and the 2,000 nanograms of diphenhydramine, are you able to tell this court whether or not that amount in this skeletal muscle is an amount that was lethal?
A very good question. Given the nature of the case and the nature of the sample, all I can say is with scientific certainty, Your Honor, is that this individual was exposed to acetaminophen and diphenhydramine.
And so you cannot say whether or not it was enough to cause overdose or underdose.
There's not enough information there for me to say whether or not this was an overdose or this was an underdose.
And there is not, it's also safe to say that there is not enough information to determine whether or not it was lethal or the level amounted to toxicity.
That is correct. I would require more information to actually come up with something that would be within scientific certainty.
What information would you need? What additional information would you need in order to make that determination?
Unlike the clinical field, in the forensic field, the level of determination is a little bit higher. So I would need additional specimens like blood, stomach contents, liver, hair. And then once the analysis is complete, Your Honor, then I would have to take a look at all the levels to come to any type of conclusion to give to the medical examiner.
I want to talk to you, even though we understand that you were not able to determine the toxicity or whether or not the dosage was an overdose. I want to speak with you in reference to first acetaminophen. Is acetaminophen a relatively safe substance when taken the proper dosage?
Yes, and if I may offer this, everything is safe. It's the dose that determines toxicity.
And I'm sorry, let me back up. I want to talk to you about, in the event, considering if you have additional samples, if you have additional information, what are some of the symptoms that will cause acute hepatic necrosis?
You're talking about acetaminophen.
Yes.
Can you define what that is first?
Okay, can you tell the court what is acute hepatic necrosis?
Necrosis is the breakdown of, we're talking about the liver, Your Honor.
Right.
So it's talking
That
about
tissue?
that tissue and the breakdown of the structure of that tissue.
And in particular, do you say that liver tissue?
That's liver tissue, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
And what are some of the symptoms of acute hepatic necrosis?
Well, before you get to that point, there's nausea, vomiting can occur. Acetaminophen will affect, in large doses, the liver, and it will affect the kidney.
Is fatigue also a symptom of acute hepatic necrosis?
Now, that's a general term, and it could apply to not just acetaminophen, to many other compounds as well.
And what about nausea?
Yes, nausea and vomiting can occur.
And if these symptoms does occur, can acute hepatic necrosis be treated if found in a timely manner?
Certainly that condition would have to determine if the liver, for the sake of this hearing, I'm not using hepatic, I'm going to say liver. There's tests that the clinician can do to see if the liver is not performing correctly, and they can treat it.
And if not treated, can one of the results of liver failure or acute hepatic necrosis, can one of those results be death?
If it's not treated and the dosage is severe enough, the end result could result in death.
Diphenhydramine, that is a drug that's commonly sold over the counter.
Yes.
And is that drug typically some form of Benadryl?
Well, the common name is, most people use this Benadryl. The chemical name is diphenhydramine.
And is diphenhydramine a relatively safe substance when taken the proper dosage?
Yes, again, everything is safe. Dose determines toxicity.
So I want to talk to you about acute diphenhydramine toxicity. Can you tell the court what that is?
Ooh, there's several side effects.
Okay.
Of course, you always have nausea, vomiting. It can affect the heart rate conduction, low blood pressure. You can have stupor, coma, and unfortunately, it can result in death.
So I want to speak with you about postmortem redistribution. Can we first tell the court what is postmortem redistribution?
Yes, Your Honor, I'll present it this way to you. When you're alive, you have active processes that control absorption, distribution, metabolism, elimination. At death, there's no active process. What we have is a passive process in which compounds will move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. And to give you a prime example, let's say I have a clear vessel. I have a partition in between. I have this much water in one, and this much in all one. I have a pump right here. And a living person, this pump is active. So it's pumping water from here to here. At death, what happens? The pump no longer works. So the levels will go from high concentration to low concentration, and eventually they're trying to achieve an equilibrium. And this is a phenomenon that happens post-mortem. So it will move from high concentration to low concentration. They're trying to go down a concentration gradient. So without the activity there, it must level out. This happens in post-mortem with tissue, in which areas of high concentration will go into areas of low concentration. And that's why in post-mortem analysis, you want to analyze many different tissues.
Got it.
Okay.
So when we're discussing post-mortem redistribution, and let's speak about acetaminophen, right? So at the time, you already testified that you can say with your expertise that the compounds of acetaminophen and diphenhydramine were in the body shortly before death.
Yes.
And so, can you explain how the acetaminophen starts in the body? Is that in the blood?
Yes, depending on, we'll start with blood.
All right.
And everything, it goes, when you take it orally or inject, it's going to go into blood. We call that an absorption phase. It then gets distributed throughout your whole body, including your hair, toenails, goes everywhere. And then it's metabolized. It's broken down, then it's eliminated.
And does it take time to metabolize?
Yes.
Does it take time to break down?
Yes.
And then it takes time to eliminate?
Yes.
And at some point, as the acetaminophen or diphenhydramine travels through the body, it ends up in tissues, muscle tissue.
Yes, it goes everywhere.
And then post-mortem, if you see signs of a metabolite, that means at some point it had to take time to break down.
Yes.
And if the actual compound is present, you can't determine, or can you determine, whether or not the amount of time between the compound versus the metabolite?
No.
But do you agree that it had to be some time that exists for it to go from the compound to the metabolite?
Yes.
But you just can't say definitively how long that was?
No, I cannot calculate, in this case, all I have is skeletal muscle, Your Honor. I cannot calculate the dose. I cannot calculate the frequency of administration. And I cannot determine how long it took to metabolize because each individual is different. In children, they have a faster metabolism than adults. Infants may have a faster metabolism than adults. So those questions I cannot answer with any degree of scientific certainty.
And let me ask you this. Are you able to determine, even though you can't determine the frequency of any of these compounds that was found in this muscle, can you determine whether or not it was more than one dosage due to the fact that you had a compound and due to the fact that you had a metabolite?
No, I cannot. And the key word is dose. Based on this one sample, this one analysis, all I can say is the individual was exposed. I cannot calculate dose, and I cannot calculate frequency.
And you stated that you cannot calculate dose, you cannot calculate frequency. I want to first ask you, in reference to this sample, since this sample was of a 6-year-old child, can you tell this court whether what the toxic level of acetaminophen is in a 6-year-old child and what they will be in the blood?
Based on this case, I cannot calculate the dose, but clinically, the level should not be more than 200 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
So they got 200 milligrams
Per kilogram.
per kilogram of body weight. Okay.
And that would be the toxic level. Well, that would be, at that point, at 200 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Is that the recommended level, or
That's the
level?
maximum you should actually give a child up to 6 years old.
And is that the same for diphenhydramine?
It's probably the same, yes.
So anything beyond the 200 milligrams per kilogram of the body weight will possibly be a level of toxicity.
Yeah, you may achieve side effects at that level, and it could occur at a much lower level. It's difficult to postulate, but certainly from a clinical point of view, at that point with both drugs, you want to be aware.
But from a clinical point of view, how is it fair to say that you don't have a lot of samples when it comes to children to test clinically?
Clinically, for children and adults, what we get is blood or urine.
But is there any clinical samples or clinical tests that are generally ran on children?
Oh, sure. They run clinical tests on children all the time.
And so it's safe to say the clinician, given certain factors that they may have, they may be able to make these quantitative analyses and or have these quantitative results as a result of their testing.
Yes, clinicians will use these results and look at patients all the time to make assessment of the status of their patient.
And hold on a second.
Clear, Your Honor.
You're fine, thank you.
Am I clear, young lady? Okay. I'm trying to stay still. You know, I'm used to talking to the jury or to the judge. So I can't walk that way.
All right, so I want to ask you, why is it more difficult to form a quantitative analysis or quantitative number in reference to skeletal muscle versus blood?
It's extremely difficult. In this particular case, all I have is skeletal muscle. And due to many factors that occur post-mortem, with post-mortem redistribution and other factors, I cannot use an active formula to determine what it is in another specimen. I actually need to measure that specimen. Unfortunately, in this case, all I have is skeletal muscle. So I cannot be definitive about what is in other tissues.
You have worked on cold cases before,
Yes, ma'am.
and it's fair to say you worked on more than one. This isn't your first cold case.
No, this is not my first yes.
Is it fair to say that in some in your postmortem cases or your cold cases that you may only have muscle tissue when the body is found in the skeleton form?
That's fair to say. Sometimes I don't even, there's not even bone marrow. It depends on the degree of decomposition.
And would you agree with me that in the more recent years that there have only been a few cases in which you're able to determine therapeutic and or illicit drugs in the muscle tissues due to the passage of time within the public trash bag? Dr. Jackson, would you agree with me that when dealing with muscle tissue and seriously decomposed organisms, that there is not a lot of studies that talk about the quantitative analysis and the ability to quantify any type of therapeutic or illicit drugs within those skeletal muscle tissues that may have been located?
If I understand your question correctly,
I'm sorry, do you need to withdraw that question?
Yes, let me withdraw that question.
Okay.
My question is, would you agree with me, Dr. Jackson, that there isn't a lot of well-documented studies as it relates to being able to quantify the blood concentration levels of any organism of any skeletal muscle organisms that you tested, that have been tested due to the fact that you're not able to truly?
could you restate that
Yes,
question?
give me one.
Your Honor, if I may ask a couple questions.
Any objection? For purpose of expediency, let's go ahead.
Dr. Jackson, would you agree that the study of compounds or substances occurring in decomposed remains in the skeletal muscle and then trying to obtain a calculation of what would be in the blood based thereon, but there just aren't very many?
I'll answer your question this way. We have a lot of studies where we've measured compounds in muscle and other tissue, and decomposed tissue. The ability to extrapolate those findings to other tissues is very limited due to some of the factors that I've mentioned before.
And so are you saying that you believe that there are well-documented studies?
There's well-documented studies on the analysis of tissue like skeletal muscle and liver that is decomposed. The issue is taking those findings and trying to extrapolate to another tissue such as blood. That's been, quite frankly, almost impossible to do because of many different factors that are present post-mortem. So we tend to say that the individual has been exposed. Now, if I had additional tissue, like blood, then I'd be more definitive.
And I don't know if we're understanding each other, but
Probably not.
the question I'm asking is the practice of correlating or making a determination about blood with specific drugs and then testing the results of trying to quantify what would be in the blood based on what was present in the muscle is, if there's much literature out there, many studies that have attempted to do that you are aware of.
I'm aware, in years past, there's a few studies, but they were not conclusive.
And that's really what I'm getting at. There aren't very many studies. There's not much literature available, correct?
The literature is not definitive, I like to put it that way.
And the interpretation of trying to do that process of trying to say how much would be in the blood based on what is present in the muscle is complicated.
It's not our standard practice to do that.
Because it's complicated, correct?
It's extremely complicated. There's so many factors here that, and it doesn't reach the level of scientific certainty, so we do not perform that. That's not our standard practice.
So because it's not well documented and it's complicated, it is not standard practice,
It is not standard practice to try to extrapolate a finding in skeletal muscle and then go to blood, especially if you do not have a blood sample. You must analyze the blood. There are so many variables there that it is not our standard practice to do that.
And are you aware that as of 2021, published in the Forensic Science International Journal, that there has been a validated method for the quantification of drugs in postmortem blood and muscle samples?
But yes, we can quantitate. That doesn't go to the question. The question actually is, can you extrapolate from skeletal muscle and there's no blood to blood? Yes, as I've already stated, we can analyze blood and skeletal muscle for compounds. For a definitive decision, you have to analyze blood. There's no way getting around it. You have to analyze blood. This is a medical legal situation. We have to have, the standard is, you have to analyze blood.
And I'm just asking if you're aware of a 2021 study that says that,
I may not be. Yes,
that did find that skeletal muscle was an appropriate substitute for blood in cases where blood is not available. Are you
I
familiar with
disagree with
that?
that study.
I'm just asking if you're familiar
I'm aware
with
of a
it.
lot of studies like that.
So you are aware that others in the field have found that muscle is an appropriate substitute. I'm not asking whether you agree with them. I'm just asking if you're aware that others have found, written and been published about muscle being an appropriate substitute.
Well, certainly.
Okay.
But if you look closely at the article,
And Dr. Jackson, I'm just asking if he's aware.
I understand, he has a right to explain his answer. It's not crossing light, so let's do it. Go ahead.
the muscle was fresh.
In the study?
In the study of the study.
The 2021 study?
It was not decomposed.
And Dr. Jackson, I'm going to have to disagree. The study was specific to cases where blood wasn't available because of decomposed or skeletal remains. I can present you with a copy.
I do not share that opinion. I don't share the opinion.
Can we make sure we're talking about the same study? Let me have him look at it.
I agree that. I think I've already agreed that.
Are you talking, is that the study that you were referring to?
This study, I agree that, yes, you can quantitate drugs in postmortem blood and muscle samples. Totally agree. I've already agreed to that.
I have nothing further.
Good morning, Dr. Jackson.
Good morning, sir.
In that study that the state presented to you, is there significance that they were studying muscular homogenate? Is that something that's significant?
What we tend to do with solid tissue is make a slurry.
What is muscle hydrogenate?
I believe that's what he's going to explain what that means.
Okay, tell me what that is.
So we cannot analyze the whole solid tissue. So we will make what we call homogenate or slurry by adding water to a certain proportion and using homogenizer to make it more fluid-like so we can do the analysis.
Now, a problem with postmortem skeletal muscle, is it fair to say, and some studies have already looked at this, is that the muscle as we find it is not necessarily homogeneous with the drugs that are in it.
Could you repeat that, sir?
Sure. There have been studies done that are attempting to look at the concentration of a drug in skeletal muscle to see if we can reliably say what the blood dosage was. There have been studies like that, right?
Correct.
Okay. And a problem they found in those studies is that the levels and concentrations of drugs throughout a given muscle are not necessarily homogeneous. In different locations, can give different results.
They're not homogeneous.
Homogeneous, I'm sorry.
That is correct. The deposition of drugs in muscle is not uniform throughout the entire muscle.
So if you had one sample from a muscle, you could get a vastly different sample from a different portion of that muscle.
Yes.
And one muscle could vary significantly from a different muscle, right?
Correct.
And there has not been a discernible pattern of why that is.
Correct.
In our case, we have a given sample that was given to you, right, and sent to you.
Correct, sir.
You did not have multiple samples to compare.
That is correct, sir.
And you were left to test what you were sent.
That is correct, sir.
That creates a big problem for you to try and determine blood dosage, right? Blood levels or dosage.
Without additional specimens, sir, it's not. I cannot determine that with scientific certainty.
Now, the study that the state presented you, how do you distinguish their findings to our case presently?
I'll have to take a look at it real quick.
Take a look.
Yeah, as I suspected that in this study,
You use the mic though.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
They were fresh samples.
What do you mean by fresh sample?
They were collected at autopsy. There was other specimens available. There was one muscle, so as muscle that was taken, they took the same muscle from each patient. The degree of decomposition was validated at the autopsy. There was other signs for them to discuss the stages of decomposition, which is not available.
So understanding the study, and now that you've looked at it, it's not that you disagree with what they found, it's that you distinguish it from our case presently.
Yes, I definitely distinguish this study from the case before the court.
Dr. Jackson, are you aware, have you been made aware of the opinion of Mark Gonzalez as he's been consulted in this case?
I've been made aware.
Right. And you understand that he is attempting to quantify dosages and blood levels based on skeletal muscle, right? Are you aware that's what he's attempting to do?
Yes.
Right. And he's doing that for acetaminophen and diphenhydramine, right?
Correct.
And his findings were that he can use a formula to determine, based on skeletal muscle concentration, to determine the blood level at the time of ingestion, correct?
Correct.
And his opinion is that this represented, from your findings and your measurement of concentration in the muscle, represents a lethal dose or certainly an overdose. That's his finding.
That's his finding.
He also has found, his opinion is that the amounts of the drugs represent that the drugs were given on a chronic basis.
I'm sorry.
That the amounts of the drugs, the concentrations, I shouldn't say amounts, the concentrations can tell him that this represents that the drug was given on a chronic basis. Are you aware he's attempting to opine
That's
on
my
that?
understanding.
And also that the fact that there was a metabolite present for diphenhydramine, he's attempting to give the opinion that this also represents that this was given on a chronic basis. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Is it safe to say you wholeheartedly agree or disagree with his approach to this?
I would say I disagree. I do not share his opinion on his findings.
Wait, say that again? You shared it?
I do not share.
Oh,
it.
okay. All right.
And briefly, your opinion from the limited information you had in your work on the case is that the drug concentrations in the muscle can only tell you the child was exposed to these two medicines at least once, correct?
It tells me that my opinion is that the individual was exposed to those two drugs. Based on the limited information that I have, I cannot calculate dose. I cannot calculate frequency. I cannot determine if this is acute or chronic.
So to be clear, the diphenhydramine, the fact that there is a concentration and a metabolite, that could still be one dose, right?
Yeah, I can't determine. They cannot, with scientific certainty, determine frequency.
Okay.
They certainly can be one dose. They can be multiple doses. I just cannot say with scientific certainty.
Okay. In the studies relating to skeletal muscle to determine dosages, the studies say that it's not suitable without other factors for quantitative analysis, right?
Correct, sir. That's an important point. In our field, we need other information, other analysis to come to some type of scientific certainty concerning the questions before the court.
But trying to come to giving a quantitative analysis is the exact thing that Mark Gonzalez is attempting to do.
As I said before, I do not share his opinion, and it's based on some of the factors that I've discussed before, postmortem redistribution and other factors. I would have to assume that the findings in the skeletal muscle represented what was present treatment, which I cannot in this particular case. The individuals badly decomposed. We have postmortem redistribution and other factors. So the best I can say is that the individual was exposed to these compounds, given the limited sample, and I cannot determine without other specimens dose or frequency, acute or chronic.
I have a few questions that I want to ask you about the attempt to extrapolate or formulate that Dr. Gonzalez is making, okay?
Okay.
Is this calculation or this attempt to calculate, is what he's doing helpful at all to understand what the blood levels or dosage was?
I'll answer your question this way. In our field, it's not accepted practice to do that. Certainly, Dr. Gonzalez has the right to perform his calculation and issue opinion in this particular case. I just do not share his opinion about calculating what the blood concentration is.
In your opinion, do other people in the scientific community share your opinion, or do they share?
There's significant others in my field of forensic toxicology where it's not our practice to perform that particular calculation due to many different factors that I present.
Right. You would agree that certainly this technique is not generally supported by the scientific
It is
community.
not.
An issue with his attempt is that we don't know what the known error rate of this calculation would be, correct?
In the past, we've done studies, in my younger days, I did studies as well. I found that the calculations would overestimate and did not accurately reflect. So, probably in the mid-80s, it was not our practice in the forensic environment to perform those calculations. In the clinical environment, they were very fine.
And that's because we can compare blood samples.
Well, those calculations are based on active processes,
Right.
so they work very fine in the clinical environment. We're in a post-mortem environment. We're also in an environment where we have one specimen that's badly decomposed. There are no active process. Everything is passive. So, in a way, the formulas are not appropriate for this type of case, this type of tissue.
Okay. And you said at the beginning of your answer that that this can overestimate the amount of drugs that were.
Yes, it doesn't give us the scientific certainty that we need in a medical legal case.
It can overestimate, and we don't know by how much.
No.
Can you underestimate?
You can also do that. It's just not very reliable.
So are you saying that the process used by Gonzalez of using the skeletal muscle to determine the level of toxicity or levels of benadryl in the sample is not reasonably accepted in the scientific community? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Nothing further, Judge.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Jackson, are you aware that Dr. Gonzalez merely approximated the blood level? in his evaluation of this case.
Yes,
That Dr. Gonzalez was not indicating that he could definitively say what the blood level, but that he provided an approximation.
yes, I understand.
And that he used the approximation in conjunction with other factors to make his determination. Are you aware of that?
I'm sure we did use other factors.
Other factors such as the purported symptoms the child was having prior to death, would those be factors that could be taken into consideration
No,
in determining if there was an overdose?
no,
So in a death investigation, you wouldn't look at the symptoms the person was having to determine an overdose if you don't have blood available to test?
in the forensic informant, we have the scientific certainty. Certainly, we look at the history. The history will tell us if somebody is exhibiting side effects from a drug.
Let me be more clear.
Okay.
So it's specifically in your field of forensic toxicology, you wouldn't look at the symptoms the child may have been.
No, we look at the history. Don't get me wrong, we look at the history. We also look at our findings. And I think the findings may suggest, based on the history, that they were exhibiting side effects. But to be definitive about what that level is, because people can take, individuals can take a drug.
I think but before you do, I think you're jumping several steps ahead.
Oh, okay.
I want you to stay with me, Dr.
Okay, I'll try.
All I'm asking is if in a death investigation where overdose might be suspected, if factors that might be considered could include the symptoms the victim was having prior to death.
Yes.
Those are factors that can be considered. That's all I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay. And other factors might be a investigator's own experiences in dealing with the compounds, correct?
No.
What if let's start here. Dr. Gonzalez has a different field of specialty than you. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Dr. Gonzalez is a pharmacologist.
That is correct.
And he is principally using the principles of pharmacokinetics in his analysis of the case.
Correct.
And that's a little distinct from your charge in the case, correct?
No, not really. In my field, we have to have, we're educated by individuals such as Dr. Gonzalez.
Of course, and I'm not saying you're not educated in the same principles. I'm saying your job, what you do on a daily basis, and how you approach the cases is a little different than Dr. Gonzalez, correct?
Correct.
And your principal disagreement with Dr. Gonzalez is that you can't apply the principles of pharmacokinetics to a deceased individual.
No, my disagreement, and I'm going to be clear about this with Dr. Gonzalez, solely revolves around his utilization of a formula to calculate the blood concentration. That's my sole disagreement.
So would it surprise you to learn that Dr. Gonzalez agrees with you, that you cannot use a calculation to determine a definitive level in the blood from skeletal muscle?
I would expect him to say that. Yes.
So if that was your sole disagreement, then you don't have a disagreement.
Oh, yes, we do.
Now, you said your sole disagreement was that you can use a calculation. You indicated your sole disagreement was with this calculation to determine the blood levels. So if he agrees with you, you can't do that. And that is your sole source of disagreement. What is the disagreement?
He did anyway. He gave you approximate, which I would never do.
He gave an approximate, which he indicates is an approximation.
And he used a formula to do that, so he does not agree with me. He used a formula to determine approximation in blood.
And he used an approximation with other factors to make an opinion that the child had a lethal amount of the drug in his system.
Again, ma'am, that's not standard practice. I disagree with the use of the formula. I do not share his opinion on the use of the formula. We probably agree with 90% of what he has said. But when it comes to the use of the formula, in a case like this, I do not share his opinion.
And again, that is just with regards to using the formula at all.
Correct.
To allowing it to factor into his decision.
Once again, I agree with Dr. Gonzalez as far as other factors. We do that all the time, every day in the case. I do not share his opinion on using a formula to give you some type of approximation. That's the only thing I disagree with him on.
Because it's not standard practice.
It's not standard practice in my field.
And the accuracy is not well documented.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Is it a formula that's not accepted, there's no general degree of acceptance in using this formula in the scientific community?
And in a case like this, ma'am, yes.
In this type of case?
In this type of case, I'm going to be specific about this. Now, I probably agree with 95% of what Dr. Gonzalez said. It just comes down to the utilization of the formula to give approximate. And that's where I do not share his opinion.
Understood. All right. Very quickly, we've got
A few questions.
Yeah.
But you disagree with him that you can't use a formula to even make an approximation like this.
I would not use the formula to make an approximation, no.
And you wouldn't use the formula to make an approximation even with other factors that he used.
Even with the other factors, which I'm sure I would agree with, and I use those factors every day. But I do not share his opinion on using the formula to give an approximation.
It's not just you. It's the general opinion of the scientific community.
And in our community, it's not accepted practice to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna take a break for a minute. Who's your next witness?
We could go ahead and call Dr. Jackson and have him testify and be on his way, or we could take our forensic anthropologist.
All right, let me ask you this question. Do you have any, other than Dr. Gonzalez, are there gonna be any other medical experts who would testify that the formula used by Gonzalez is readily accepted in the scientific community?
The issue is that the formula, the issue is the formula can't determine an actual amount of blood. That hasn't been reliably demonstrated. And Dr. Gonzalez isn't saying that it did. He is using a piece of information, and he can explain to you why that factor is appropriate as a piece of information in his analysis, in conjunction with other factors that include his own experience. He has personally investigated.
No, I understand all that. My question was simply that, are there gonna be any other medical experts testifying, other than assuming, I don't know, I guess Gonzalez is gonna say it's not readily accepted in the scientific community to use this formula? I don't know because he's not here. So
He's just going to say that all you can get is an approximation, and that there are factors that could result in that number not being correct. So you can't use it to be definitive, but it is instructive.
Okay. But
In
he's
his field.
He's gonna say that. Is there anyone other than him that's gonna say that?
There aren't any other pharmacologists.
That's what I'm asking. So the answer is no. Okay, that's what I need to know.
Jackson, briefly, Judge.
Yes.
The state is trying to hide behind this approximation. Even making the approximation is not the standard, and Dr. Jackson just told us. There's no difference. Pretending that Dr. Gonzalez is going to come in and agree and say, oh yeah, you can't use the formula, but I just made an approximation, is dishonest, because what he's saying is, my approximation is well over the therapeutic level, it's an overdose. That's the problem.
Right, I understand.
Your Honor, the issue isn't whether something is the standard. Daubert sets forth a number of factors for the court to consider. That list is not exhaustive. It's not a required list. The court has wide latitude to look at the reliability of scientific testimony. That's like at the heart of the issue here. The court is determining whether the jury will be assisted in Dr. Gonzalez's testimony, whether it is reliable and whether it's relevant. And there are a number of factors for the court to consider. And the fact that it is not standard practice to use an approximation in the field of forensic toxicology does not mean that it is not useful or reliable for another expert to do so in a different type of field and in a different context.
Well, but the court has to make a finding that in the general degree of acceptance in the scientific community is one of the required findings in a Daubert analysis. So the court has to make a decision that the methodology, there is a general degree of acceptance in the scientific community as to this methodology. So that is clearly one of the Daubert standards.
But Dr. Gonzalez agrees with Dr. Jackson. You cannot say definitively what is in the blood based on what is in the muscle. There is no disagreement.
I understand your position. I don't know if I agree with you about the approximation. So I'm going to take a break, and then you can call whichever witness you want to call. But I don't know if I need to hear from Dr. Gonzalez before do you want me to hear from him before I rule?
Yes, Your Honor. I think that it's very important for you to understand the totality of how Dr. Gonzalez gets to this conclusion that there was an overdose. That's really the heart of this conclusion, and how he got to it, and understand all of his personal experience that allows him to make that conclusion.
I will defer ruling until I hear from him, but you're going to have to. I mean, I know how to handle it with the rest of the witnesses.
Your Honor, I think there's an issue that we can't talk about Dr. Gonzalez's opinion directly with any of the scientific experts
Right.
until you rule. He's had multiple opportunities to appear by Zoom. The defense
That's true.
He hasn't.
Yeah,
And Your Honor, he can ask him a hypothetical. If a person were to come in court and say that they could do this, would you agree? You can achieve the same thing. The defense can also recall Dr. Jackson. The defense can call any witness if he feels that the ability to cross during the state's case in chief did not fully develop the issue. He can call the witness in his case in chief. But that's no reason to exclude the doctor.
I think part of this problem is that this particular expert was, even though this case was indicted when 2022. I understand the state has had issues with getting an expert, but this expert was just identified on December 21st of 2023. We've had limited time. I made myself available to try to hear from this doctor by Zoom, tried to accommodate him. He couldn't do. We were going to do it during lunch yesterday, then we're going to do it after court, and then that didn't work. And this morning, that didn't work. And
my issue is that the defense is indicating a preference for how they want to do something without providing for any case law that failure to award them the preference that they would like would result in any sort of prejudice or legal issue that would result in a problem for the integrity of this case. And so there's no reason to disqualify an expert that could be useful and important to the jury simply because the defense has a preference of how they like to question.
No, I have Gonzalez's report in this background, so I understand what his background is and what he's going to be testifying about. The issue is whether the theory of his theory or technique can be tested, whether it's subject to peer review and publication, the known potential rate of error for the theory, the general degree of acceptance in the scientific community of the theory. So there are certain standards that I have to follow before this can even get to a jury. So that's what the decision is based on.
I also withhold questioning Dr. Jackson until you've heard from Dr. Gonzalez.
As long as you don't put up Dr. Jackson? Well, I mean, are there going to be any other scientific witnesses who are going to testify before Gonzalez?
We have Dr. Gallup, but Mr. Bozarth indicated that he wanted to have Dr. Jackson for purposes of rebutting Dr. Gonzalez.
I thought Dr. Jackson's the most on-point opinion, but I think Dr. Gallup will also share Dr. Jackson's opinion.
Well, we're just then. I mean, I don't want it to. I feel like I'm trying to schedule this trial around Dr. Gonzalez's availability, and that's not. I mean, this case has been specially set since June of last year. So I'll reserve ruling until I have to make a ruling, and then I'll make it. But if it, if we're just going to see how it goes.
Sure.
All right, thank you. I don't think you're excused though, so we're not done with you completely. But you're all seeing it now.
Yes, Your Honor. We'll move on to other witnesses so that you can hear from Dr. Gonzalez before Dr. Jackson testifies.
All right, we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll.
All right, guys. So court is on break. Let me get this thing caught up here. But you just heard there, the court started out with a hearing today, it looks like, and it was over. It's going to be important testimony because that's about essentially what we were watching was about the toxicology reports that the state is relying upon to say that there was medications in the child that resulted in his death. So let's get back. All right, so we are back now. We're going to have our first witness here.
Presentations this morning obviously took longer than anticipated, but we are ready to go. So, starting at our next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Dr. Meredith Tice.
Raise your right hand. You swear upon the testimony to the court, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. State the name for the court.
My name is Meredith Tice, and that's spelled M-E-R-E-D-I-T-H-T-I-S-E.
Good morning, Dr. Tice.
Good morning.
Could you please tell the jury how you're currently employed?
I currently own my own forensic consulting and training business called Suncoast Forensics.
And how long have you owned your own business?
I officially started it in July of 2022.
What sort of consulting do you focus on?
I mainly provide consulting in forensic anthropology.
Could you tell the jury a bit about your background that allows you to provide these types of services?
I'll start with my education. I received my bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia in anthropology, my master's degree from Texas State University, mainly focusing in forensic anthropology, and my PhD from the University of South Florida with a focus in forensic and biological anthropology. All of these degrees focus on coursework in forensic anthropology, mainly human osteology, which is the study of the human skeleton, skeletal trauma, and recovery of human remains.
Do you have any other training or experience that allows you to provide these services?
So while I was a student, I completed multiple internship programs to gain experience in forensic anthropology and also learn different applications of the field. I completed an internship program at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation at the medical examiner's office there with a forensic anthropologist on staff. I also completed internships at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. and the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. I was a pre-doctoral fellow for the Pima County Office of the Medical Examiner in Tucson, Arizona, where I assisted with the analysis and identification of individuals who died crossing the United States-Mexico border. While I was obtaining my PhD at the University of South Florida, I was the forensic anthropology lab manager, where I assisted law enforcement with skeletal recoveries and also with the analysis of human skeletal remains for cases that we would receive at the lab. I was then hired after graduation by the University of Lincoln in England to teach at a Master's of Forensic Anthropology program and also to mentor students who were completing their thesis projects in forensic anthropology. I then worked as a recovery leader and forensic anthropologist for a nonprofit organization. We were funded by the Department of Defense to provide World War II missing in action and killed in action recoveries of U.S. service members who died, mainly in Germany, but also a small island called Tarawa. And now, as I mentioned, I own my own company. I provide training and consulting services to medical examiners, law enforcement agencies, things like that for different forensic anthropology cases that I work.
Since your initial studies in education, have you received any continuing education in your field?
So I consistently attend different conferences in the field of forensic anthropology to learn about new and upcoming research by academics and researchers within the field. I'm also a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and as a member of that organization, I have access to the Journal of Forensic Sciences, where I'm able to regularly read peer-reviewed research and stay up to date in the field. And that's very important, especially as I'm conducting casework and teaching the different classes that I teach for my trainings.
Now that you have your own business, who typically hires you?
Typically, I'm hired by law enforcement agencies, medical examiner's offices, attorneys. I could be hired by the prosecution, the defense, or private attorneys. And I've also been hired by private families as well for consulting cases.
It's sort of implied by the term hired, but do you charge a fee for your services?
I do.
Approximately how many forensic anthropology cases have you been involved in?
I've had the opportunity to work with over 1,800 human skeletal remains for different purposes. About 400 of those were forensic cases that I completed analyses on, and then about 100 of those incorporated the actual recovery of those remains, whether they were buried or on the surface.
Broadly, could you tell the jury what the study of anthropology is?
Anthropology is a very broad field. It involves the study of humans. It incorporates language, culture, the history of humans through archaeology, as well as the biology of humans in biological anthropology.
And then specifically in the forensic context, what is forensic anthropology?
Forensic anthropology is a more specific applied aspect of anthropology, where it focuses on the study of human skeletal remains in a forensic or death investigation context.
Could you explain to the jury what the difference would be between forensic pathology and forensic anthropology?
So there's one primary difference between a forensic anthropologist like myself and a forensic pathologist, which are typically called medical examiners. The main difference is that the forensic pathologist focuses on the soft tissue of the human body, whereas the anthropologist is focusing on the hard tissues of the human body, mainly the skeletal system. Also, an anthropologist will describe what they see on the skeleton, but a pathologist is typically the one to determine the cause and manner of death.
And how long have you been working as a forensic anthropologist?
I started doing casework as a master's student at Texas State University in 2016, and I've been working with cases since then.
Have you ever been offered and accepted as an expert in forensic anthropology in court?
Yes, ma'am.
Here in DeKalb County?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, state tenders Dr. Tice as an expert in forensic anthropology.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, she will be allowed to testify as an expert in that area.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Tice, on December 1st, 2023, were you asked to conduct a forensic anthropological analysis on a case here in DeKalb County at the medical examiner's office?
I was.
And what was included in that analysis?
I was asked to complete a forensic anthropological analysis to determine multiple aspects to gain information. The main thing that we do when we first start an anthropological analysis is conduct a skeletal inventory. Skeletal inventory provides us information on what bones are present and what are missing at the time of our analysis. We also estimate a biological profile. The biological profile incorporates multiple aspects to include an estimation of the age of the individual, the sex, whether they're male or female, the ancestry of the individual, and then also an approximate stature or height of that individual. And this is all information that's important, especially when an individual is unidentified and you're working with law enforcement or medical examiners to narrow down a list of missing persons to try to identify that individual. Next, we usually look for any indications of trauma or damage on the bone. There's three primary types of trauma or damage that we would describe. The first one is antemortem trauma, which is trauma that occurred during life. So we would know this antemortem trauma because there's evidence of healing. So typically, if you have a broken bone or you have surgery during life, your bone heals itself when you're still living, and so we would see evidence of that in the skeleton. The next type of trauma that we look for is perimortem trauma. And perimortem trauma is trauma that occurred at or around the time of death. And we typically know that it's perimortem because there's no evidence of healing. Usually the fracture lines are very jagged, sharp, and sometimes there's radiating fractures extending from those fracture lines. The last thing that we describe as far as damage is postmortem damage. And postmortem damage, also, there's no evidence of healing. There's different types of indications for postmortem damage, but there's also different things that could cause this postmortem damage, including different human factors that could have damaged the bone, animal scavenging if the bones are on the surface, construction equipment, depending on the condition of where the bones were found. The last thing usually that we do is we also describe any other unique characteristics about a skeleton that might tell us about that individual or might help us to identify that individual, such as medical devices, different diseases that they may be suffering from, different congenital abnormalities that the skeleton might have.
Was this the first time that you participated in examination of this particular set of skeletal remains?
I also, when I was a student at USF, these skeletal remains were sent to USF at the lab there. So as a student, I assisted with analysis. We received it in 2012, and the report was published in 2013.
I'd like to discuss, come back to the present day analysis that was performed. You mentioned that you first conducted a skeletal inventory. Were all the bones present at the time of your analysis?
During my analysis, I did document that there were several bones that were missing. Most of the bones of the skull were present. There were a few bones that were missing at the time of my analysis, including the 2 bones of the nose, the 2 nasal bones, those were missing. There was a fragment of the right cheekbone or zygomatic arch that was missing, and there was also 1 tooth of the mandible or the lower jaw that was missing. The tooth was most likely missing either as a result of dental development and having lost that baby tooth, which occurs during specific times throughout a child's life, or it could have been lost postmortem because certain teeth can fall out after death because they have a single root. There were also several postcranial bones that were missing. Is it okay if I read my report?
And I was just going to ask you, as part of this analysis, did you prepare a report of your findings?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And in that report, did you include photographs to illustrate the points that you are referencing in your report?
I did, yes, ma'am.
Did you also prepare an amended report after reviewing additional evidence from the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Permission to approach witness number. Showing you Exhibit 65. Do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
This is my forensic anthropology report that I wrote initially after looking at the remains.
And is it a true and correct copy?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, the state's under 65 in evidence.
Any objection?
I'm showing you Exhibit 66. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you recognize it?
This was the amended report that I wrote after reviewing additional photographs that's dated December 13th.
And is that a true and correct copy of your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, this time the state's under 66 in evidence.
Any objection?
We were discussing the missing bone portions in your report. Would it be helpful to view some of the photographs that you took?
Yes, ma'am, I would actually.
I want to start with a photograph that you prepared from page 5 of your report. What are we looking at here?
This is a photograph that I took. The first photograph I usually take is an overall view of the skeleton to demonstrate all the bones present in my analysis.
And you indicated that there were a number of bones missing. Could you please tell, now that you have your report in front of you, finish your testimony about the remaining items?
Yes, ma'am. So the postcranial skeleton is the skeleton with the exception of the skull. And of those postcranial elements, we were missing several, including the greater and lesser wings of the hyoid, which is a bone that's suspended in the neck. We were also missing 6 different ribs. The right clavicle, which is the collarbone on the right side. The right and left scapula, which are also called the shoulder blades. So both scapula were missing. The right and left patella, which are your kneecaps. We were missing the left humerus, which is the large bone in the upper arm. The left femur, which is the large bone in the upper leg. And several small bones of the hands.
What are some of the reasons that the bones could be missing or not present?
Typically, when bones are missing at the time of our analysis, if the remains were found on the surface, we would anticipate that these bones were not recovered because they were moved by animal activity. Animals frequently interact with bones when they're on the surface, so frequently they can move bones, or some of the small hand bones are typically not recovered, depending on the recovery process. Because these remains were found in 1999 and have been so long over time that since I've done my analysis this past year, it's also possible that these bones may have been used for DNA sampling or other processes that may have been utilized in order to aid in identification. So because I wasn't a part of the process throughout the entire duration, it's hard to distinguish between the two.
Does that mean that some bones could have been sent off to other labs for analysis in attempting to make an identification through the use of DNA?
It is possible.
When assessing the biological profile of skeletal remains, like you discussed earlier, what is the approximate age of the skeletal remains at issue here?
So based on my analysis, using different methods, I estimate the age of the skeleton to be approximately 4 to 7 years of age.
And how did you determine the age of the individual?
When we estimate age of children and their skeletons, there's different things that we look at. Predominantly, we're looking at something called epiphyseal fusion. And the epiphyses are what we commonly hear are growth plates throughout the body. And these growth plates allow our bones to continue to grow. So we can look at the fusion of these growth plates as they allow the body to grow because they fuse at certain times throughout the development of that child. So I use that developmental fusion as well as dental development to estimate the age of this individual because as we know, we have very specific dental development patterns. We have our baby teeth, our deciduous teeth that are lost at certain times and our permanent teeth replace those.
Were you able to estimate the ancestry of the remains?
So based on my analysis of and observations of the cranium, the skull, I was able to estimate that the ancestry is most likely American Black.
Were you able to estimate the sex of the remains?
The sex is difficult. There are no methods for child sex estimation because children haven't gone through the puberty process yet, so I was not able to determine the sex of the individual.
Were you able to determine the stature?
Similar to sex, there's no methods because they haven't gone through puberty, and children vary in height so much, so there's no way to estimate the height of the individual with stature, so the stature is considered indeterminate as well.
Could you describe the overall condition of the remains as you found them at the medical examiner's office?
So I did my analysis at the medical examiner's office in DeKalb County. The bones were anywhere from a light brown to dark brown in color, which is most likely due to environmental or decompositional staining, which is very common. Also, there was some mummified tissue still present. As you can see in the photograph, the lower legs from about the knee down and the feet were still completely mummified, and so the feet bones were still encased in that mummified tissue.
Did you observe any damage to the remains?
There was some damage that I documented to the remains. Obviously, with the missing nasal bones, I documented that, and there were also a few locations on the side of the face that had damage on the cheekbone as well as on the mandible.
I want to direct your attention to a previously admitted exhibit. That's going to be exhibit 45 from the scene. What would be the significance of the coloration of the bones being a result of decomposition and environmental staining?
So this photograph shows the front of the cranium, the skull. You can see that there's still some mummified tissue adherent to the top of the skull. Also, on the left side of the skull, it's much lighter brown, which shows that it actually was not laying on the ground and receiving the same staining as the dark staining on the right side of the skull that we see, or our right side of the skull should be the individual's left.
And what is significant about environmental or decompositional staining? What does that tell you?
So decompositional staining is essentially something that we look for at crime scenes when we have decomposing or decomposed bodies, and it's a dark staining that is underneath or directly surrounding a body. We go through a process when we decompose where our body expels a dark fluid or liquid through the decomposition process, so it will stain the ground or anything that we're laying on during the decompositional process, and it will also stain the bones in the process a much darker color.
To show you another exhibit that was previously published, this is going to be Exhibit 42. Is there anything about the area surrounding the skull in this photograph that is of interest to you?
So in this photograph, you can see that the skull is separated from the rest of the body. One thing that is of interest is the dark staining just below and to the right of the skull there, almost in an oval shape, which would suggest that it could potentially be decompositional staining.
Showing you what's previously admitted as Exhibit 43. This is a closer up of that area. Is that the area that you're referring to that could be decompositional fluid in the ground?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to tell, based on these scene photographs, whether the skull was dragged away from the body or whether the body was dragged away from the skull?
It's difficult to tell since I wasn't at the scene, but it is unique that there is this decompositional staining beside the skull. The skull itself would not cause this amount of decompositional staining, so it is possible that the body was actually located here and then possibly moved away from that stain at some point during the process.
And were you able to form an opinion as to how long the remains may have been decomposing?
Since I wasn't at the scene during time of recovery, I'm not familiar with the temperature or the environmental conditions around the time of recovery. I'm not able to determine how long that individual was there prior to recovery.
Let's go back to your photographs. Were you provided with any other materials or exhibits or evidence aside from the skeleton that you analyzed for review?
I was provided with x-rays that were taken at the medical examiner's office from my request at the time of my analysis, and I was also provided different scene photographs and photographs taken at the medical examiner's office from around the time of recovery in 1999.
Were either of these items made, either the x-rays or the scene photographs made available to you back in 2013 when the case was initially examined?
I do not remember reviewing photographs back then.
And did you review these scene photographs?
I did, yes, ma'am.
What did you review in the photographs from the scene?
So I received some of these photographs after my initial report, and the objective was to try to determine if the damage on the side of the skull was present at the time of recovery, or if it could potentially have been damage as a result of extensive handling over the course of time since the recovery until my analysis.
Looking at page 6 of your report, is this a photograph that you took?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And does it demonstrate some of the damage or missing components to the skull that you testified to the jury about?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Could you, and if you wouldn't mind standing and pointing to the screen behind you, they have a larger screen, could you tell the jury where you observed missing components or damage from the photograph on page 6 of your report?
So this is the front of the skull showing the two missing nasal bones that should be here, coming down about halfway down the nasal opening, and they were missing at the time of my analysis.
What are some possible reasons that those could be missing?
Those could be missing as a result of just postmortem loss. As a child, your sutures are not necessarily completely locked in place, so it is possible that they may have just fallen out after death, or the other option is that it potentially have been from some type of trauma, but it's unable to determine that without additional information.
And going back to the skull that was photographed from the scene, Exhibit 45, were they missing at the time of recovery?
Yes, ma'am, they were.
And you indicate they could have fallen out as the child was decomposing, so they would likely be in the ground below the child if that happened, if they hadn't been removed by some scavenging animal or some other outside influence.
Yes, ma'am.
What are some of the things from the environment that could disrupt or displace components of skeletal remains?
So animals are definitely the most common disruption to human skeletal remains during the decomposition process. Some other things that could potentially impact the dispersion of these remains or the condition of the remains are things like water. If there's a lot of rainfall or flooding, that can also impact the skeletal remains. If depending on the circumstances, I've worked cases where construction equipment has damaged remains, and ultimately that's sometimes how they're found. But because these remains are found during construction, that can also impact the remains.
Based on your training and experience, is there any reason that these two nasal bones couldn't have been carried off by a scavenging animal?
It is possible.
Is there any reason that if they fell into the ground below that they couldn't have been there in the earth below the body?
It is possible.
Any reason they couldn't have been carried off by water if they'd fallen down by the child and there'd been a heavy storm?
That is possible as well.
Any reason that it couldn't be a result of trauma to the child prior to that?
That is possible as well.
Are you able to tell the jury which of those possibilities resulted in the loss of the bones in this particular case?
No, ma'am.
I'm going to refer you to page 8 of your report. You discuss damage to the zygomatic arch and mandible. Could you please illustrate by pointing to the jury in this image what you're talking about?
So the zygomatic arch is the bone that you feel in your cheek. and this is a zygomatic arch extending here all the way to the front of the skull. So we have a gap between these two segments of the bone that's missing at the time of recovery, as well as the time of analysis. Also, there was damage to the mandible here in the back, and then also up top here, which is a little obscured by clay from the clay reconstructions that have been completed, but there was damage to the top of the mandible as well.
What could have caused this damage?
This damage, similar to the nasal bones, could have been caused by animal activity, if animals were interacting with the remains prior to recovery, or it's also possible that it could have been from perimortem trauma that may have occurred around the time of death.
What do you mean by perimortem trauma?
So perimortem trauma is trauma we categorize at or around the time of death. Essentially, it is its indications are sharp, jagged edges. Sometimes you have reading fractures. It really just depends on the location of that trauma and what was used to cause the trauma.
Could that be trauma as a result of being punched in the face?
Yes, ma'am.
Could that be trauma as a result of being struck with a heavy object?
It could be, yes.
Could that be trauma as a result of being forcefully pushed and hitting an object?
It could, yes.
Could that be trauma based on being in a car accident and having an impact to the face?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to tell this jury which, if any of those hypotheticals or animal activity actually occurred in this case?
No, ma'am.
Now, with animal activity, are there other indications that are present that can help you make the determination more conclusively?
So typically with animal activity, there are signs that we see on the bone that are very typical of either carnivorous animal activity. So with large canines, we see kind of pits and holes in the bone that are made when they chew on the bones. Also with smaller animals or rodents, we see almost like a scraping pattern, where they're scraping their front teeth against the bone. And we do see this commonly on the bone surfaces when there is animal activity.
Did you observe any of those indications in this case?
No, ma'am.
Could this injury been sustained while the child was alive?
It is possible.
If the child had been injured and had an exposed wound when they were left there in the woods, could that actually draw animal activity?
It can. Typically when you have open wounds at death, then the blood typically attracts more maggots, and also that smell that could potentially attract animals and increase animal activity in that specific area.
If you take post-mortem damage out of the equation, we're talking about these environmental factors, scavenging animals, water, heavy equipment running over unknown remains, things like that. If you take that out of the equation, do you have any knowledge or expertise about whether it's uncommon for children to fracture in this particular part of the face?
It's not impossible for a child to sustain a fracture in this part of the face, but it would require a large amount of force to cause the bone to fracture to the extent where a whole segment is missing.
So typically when you see a fracture like that, is it more consistent with something like abuse or a car accident?
Those could be factors that would cause this.
In your report, you documented that there was no pathology present on the skeletal remains. Can you please explain what you meant by that?
So during my analysis, I look for pathology, which is it could be broad, but it could be any signs of malnutrition in individuals, cancer, disease, or any other unique factors that the individual is born with, to talk a little bit about that individual and tell their story.
And did you observe any signs of malnutrition with the remains?
No, ma'am.
You indicated that you prepared an amended report. Why did you prepare an amended report in this case?
I initially wrote my report with material that I was provided after completing my anthropological analysis at the DeKalb County Medical Examiner's Office. And upon discussion, I asked if there were any additional photographs of the scene at the medical examiner's that was close up of the skull, because I didn't really have any of those photographs. But I wanted to see if the fractures on the skull were present at the time of recovery, as opposed to potentially occurring later on just due to handling or being dropped or something like that.
So prior to having that information, what was your conclusion in the initial report?
Initially, I notated that the damage on the skull was most likely a result of postmortem damage because of the limited information that I had.
Once you received the additional information showing the exact condition of the remains as they were recovered, what was your finding?
So because I could see that the damage to the skull was present at the time of recovery, there were photographs of the damage on scene, I wanted to document that it was possible. We couldn't rule out that it could potentially be a result of perimortem trauma in addition to possibly postmortem damage, and that I wasn't able to distinguish between the two.
Now, I want to refer you back to the examination that was done in 2013. Were the remains in the same condition as they were back in 2013 when you evaluated them in 2023?
I did. I looked back at the photographs to refresh my memory, and the remains were in the same condition.
And were the findings in 2023, the initial report, consistent with the findings in the report from 2013?
The report 2013 documented that the damage to the skull was most likely a result of postmortem damage.
And did you have the seen photographs at that time during that examination?
I'm not aware of photographs that we had at the time of that examination.
And having the benefit of the scene photographs in 2023, does your opinion change?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell this jury conclusively whether this damage was prior to death or after death?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Cross.
Morning, Dr. Tice. I'd like to talk to you. I want to start with the 2013. It was titled an osteological analysis that the University of South Florida did.
Yes, sir.
And osteological, that means studying the structure of the skeleton or any bony structures, is that right?
This is skeleton, yes, sir.
I'd like to show you a moment. Defense. All right, 1 second.
Right.
Right, Coach Joner.
Yes.
Showing you what event has been marked for identification purposes as Defense Exhibit 1. If you just take a look at that. Do you recognize that?
I do, yes, sir.
That is the 2013 report.
This is.
All right, and you participated on that.
I did. I was a student and co-authored it with my PhD advisor at the time.
All right, in fact, you signed it.
I did.
All right. All right, at this time, defense moves defense exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection? All right, it's admitted.
On the screen, that is the same report.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to direct you on that first page there in the middle paragraph. One of the objectives, and this is item C there, is a trauma analysis to assess the presence of any hearing organ injuries, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Where do you see item C? Did you just say item C?
Yes, at my
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Now I want to take you to the next page. This is the taphonomy section. Can you tell us what taphonomy means?
Taphonomy is basically what happens to the body after death, between the time of death to the time of recovery. So it's the process the body goes through.
Now in this taphonomy section, here in the first section, reveals you guys did have crime scene photos, correct?
It looks like there were photos, yes.
Right. And this next one, you had scene and autopsy photos.
That is what it says, yes.
Okay. So you guys reviewed photos along with the skeletal remains, correct?
My advisor may have reviewed them. I don't remember seeing them at the time.
Okay. We're going to flip to, I think it's the fourth page. You can go to the screen or the word you like. In this section, there's a section titled Evidence of Animal Scavenging is present in scene photographs and on skeletal elements, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, below that, the subpoints, one of the things you talked about already, the stain of decomposition is evident on the ground surface, right?
Yes, sir.
And that was away from the clothing and legs, which appeared to be dragged post-mortem.
Yes, sir.
Now the opinion there is that happened before the body began decaying, and it was dragged at some point, and then continued to decay in a different location, right?
Well, if the decompositional staining is present at the previous location, then it would have been dragged either during the decomposition process or after, depending on if there was staining under where the body was found.
Right, and there was, correct?
I don't know. I didn't see photos of the body, but the location of the body after it was removed at the scene.
Okay, I understand. Now, the next point there, under the same
Subcategory of evidence scavenging, it's written that postmortem damage to the nasals, mandible, right zygomatic arch, and the phalanx are present on the skeletal remains, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. Safe to say, in this 2013 opinion, these are falling under the category of giving evidence to animal scavenging.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go through some of those terms. First, we had the nasals. We talked about that already. That's kind of what we think of as the bridge of our nose. Is that
Yes, sir. It's the tube on the top of the nose.
right? And the mandible we think of as the jaw. Is commonly known as the jaw, correct?
Yes, sir.
The zygomatic arch. So we have our cheekbone, but there's a thin bone that connects back to our your temporal bone.
Yes, sir.
Right. And that kind of connects behind your ear, right?
Just above your ear.
In another word, there, the phalanx refers to a finger or a toe.
A phalange or a phalanx is just another name for a phalange, which is a finger. I don't know if it's referring to a toe or a finger here, that's specified, but it's basically either a finger or toe.
And at the end, this is your signature, you were a part of this step.
It is, yes, sir.
All right. You then reviewed this again in 2013, right? That was the, I'm sorry, not 2013, in 2023.
Yes.
All right, and that's the report that the state has introduced into evidence, and you already talked about that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This was at the DeKalb County Medical Examiner's Office.
Yes, sir.
Were you aware at the time that you already reviewed the same remains, or did you find that out after?
I actually, when I was laying the skeleton out at the DeKalb County Medical Examiner's Office, some of the finger bones were in the bag, and I recognized my handwriting on the bag. So that's when I realized that I had worked on that case previously, and I looked back at my reports from USF to see that I had actually worked that same case based on the case number.
Is that a little surprising to you?
It was. I didn't realize it.
Right. And at this time you reviewed the actual skeleton, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. And all those pictures the state was showing, ones with the black background, you took those.
I did.
Okay. Okay.
On this third page for the trauma section, you wrote that there's no perimortem trauma present on the skeletal remains, correct?
Correct.
All right, and then we have another taphonomy section where we talk about the postmortem damage, right?
Correct, yes, sir.
All right, now in the middle of that,
There's a few things, but the first is that right zygomatic arch that we already talked about, right?
Yes.
Okay. The next is the nasal bones, right?
Yes, sir.
Then there's some others, including the right gonial angle. Now that's the kind of point at the bottom of our jaw, right?
It is. So next I described the different specific aspects of the mandible or the jaw that I found was more damaged.
So the next list of items are all things on the mandible or jaw.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we have the right gonial angle, we have the right coronoid process. Now that is the part that if we touch our cheekbone and then open our jaw, we can feel that bone kind of coming out below that.
Correct, yes, sir.
That zygoma bone? Is that what the cheekbone's called?
Zygomatic, yes, sir.
So if we, right here is our, coronoid process.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then there's another, portions of the right and left mandibular condyles. Is that what we think of as kind of these ball feelings in our jaw?
So the condyles are on the mandible are the different aspects of bones that articulate with the top part of the skull. So that's actually allowing you to open and close your mouth.
And all of these items had some damage on them, right?
Yes, sir.
And you attributed that as postmortem damage.
Yes, sir.
All right. Showing you on figure 4 of that report, we see the gap in that diagrammatic arch, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Looking at figure 6, this is looking kind of from below. We can see the piece missing on that Zygomatic arch, is that what's displayed there?
Yes, sir.
Show me next figure 20. This is the, on my cursor there, is this the right, sorry, gonial angle?
It is, yes, that's the point at the back of your mandible that you feel in the back of your jaw.
And there's damage noted there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Figure 19. This is that same damage, just from a different angle, right? You see my cursor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Your conclusion, and this is on December the 8th, was that no perimortem trauma or pathology was present on skeletal remains, correct?
Correct.
But that some postmortem damage was documented on the right zygomatic arch, nasal bones, and right side of the mandible, right?
Correct.
Now I understand that postmortem damage could mean a number of things, right?
Yes.
It could mean it was damaged after death before recovery, or it could mean it was damaged after recovery, right?
Exactly.
And that's why in that latest report you looked at, you wanted to see, were these bones present at that point?
Exactly.
So if you looked at those autopsy pictures and you saw that, oh, the zygomatic arch is present, and now it's not, we would still call that a postmortem injury, right?
That would definitely be a postmortem damage.
All right. But any damage that happened before recovery is also postmortem damage, right?
Correct. So we still can't rule out postmortem damage, but I wanted to see if we could, in fact, determine if that damage was caused after recovery or if it was present at the time of recovery.
With the scene and autopsy photos?
Correct.
Okay. The photos that were looked at in 2013.
I don't know what photos were looked at in 2013.
In that report, though, there were scene and autopsy photos listed in the report.
The 2013 report?
Yes.
Potentially, yes.
It's written in the report, correct?
Yes, I don't know what photos were looked at the time.
All right. Thank you.
Can you read that? Just briefly, Your Honor.
Dr. Tice, do you know if your advisor was made aware that there were photographs?
I do not know.
Do you know if your advisor spoke to a medical examiner investigator and was told about what was in photographs?
I'm not aware of.
So you don't have any personal knowledge of whether your advisor saw these photographs or not?
Okay.
And is it possible that you could have both trauma as a result of environmental factors such as animal activity and traumatic injury present in the same case?
It is possible.
Is it possible that this child was injured, was left in the woods, and that animals also participated or contributed to the state the remains were eventually found in?
That is possible as well.
And after reviewing all the evidence, can you tell this jury definitively why the bones were missing or why the damage was there?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Fair.
Okay, thank you so much. May you be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Before next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Lieutenant Quigley.
Okay.
Can you approach?
Sure. It's a universal sign for people.
Yes, Your Honor.
Raise your hand. Swear or affirm the testimony to the court to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir, I do.
State the stage name for the court.
Lieutenant Adam Quigley, Q-U-I-G-L-E-Y.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Quigley.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Could you please tell the jury where it is that you're employed?
I'm employed with the DeKalb County Police Department.
How long have you been with the detective?
Just under 18 years.
And what is your current assignment?
I'm the commander of the neighborhood enforcement team.
What does that team do?
We're a proactive team assigned to the uniform division.
Prior to becoming the commander of the specialized team, where were you assigned?
I was the commander of the homicide assault unit for the DeKalb County Police Department.
How long were you the commander of that unit?
About 2.5 years.
And prior to becoming the commander of that unit, what did you do?
I was a supervisor in the homicide unit.
And how long did you supervise the unit?
About 3 years.
And prior to supervising the unit, what did you do?
I was a detective in the homicide unit.
And how long were you detective in that unit?
About 3 years.
I want to take you back to January the 14th, 2022. On that date, did the district attorney's office reach out to you for assistance with the case we're here today for?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And why did the district attorney's office reach out to you?
At that time, they were excited about a new lead they received and information that they received. I was asked to review the case file to try to establish the likelihood or probability of bringing this case to closure.
And what was that tip?
They received a tip that they believed identified the biological father of the deceased. With that information, the idea was to identify the biological mother based on DNA to be able to prove who the deceased was at that time.
So what did you do to assist on that lead?
Investigator McClendon and I took a deeper look at the case file. We reached out to authorities in Phoenix, Arizona to ask for their help in procuring a search warrant for DNA on Ms. Teresa Black.
And did they assist?
They did.
What did they do?
Initially, they assisted us with obtaining the search warrant, and they verified her where she lived and her place of employment.
And then did you go to Phoenix, Arizona?
We did.
You said you mentioned Investigator McClendon. Who's that?
He's an investigator with the district attorney's office.
And was it just you and Investigator McClendon that went to Arizona?
Yes, it was.
When did you fly to Arizona?
It was Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2022.
And did you do anything that day on February the 14th?
I believe the initial day we arrived, we just checked into the hotel. We made contact with our counterparts in Phoenix. They confirmed that they had a good location on where Teresa was at that time. The plans were to pick her up, bring her to Phoenix headquarters, where we would interview her if she wished, and execute the search warrant for her DNA.
And when did that happen?
I believe that was the 15th of February, the following day.
So the following day, on February the 15th, were the local police able to locate Ms. Black and bring her to headquarters?
Yes, they were.
How was she brought to headquarters?
She was brought in one of their police units. I'm not sure if it was marking on. When we arrived, she was already waiting us in their interview room.
And was she handcuffed?
At that time, no.
Was Miss Black at that time in custody?
She was.
Was there anyone in the interview room with her?
No, it was not.
Was the interview room set up for audio and video recording?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Was it active during the time that you met with and interviewed Miss Black?
It was.
When you went to interview Miss Black, who went with you, if anyone?
Investigator Clinton.
Was there anyone else in the room besides from yourself, Investigator McClendon, and Miss Black?
No.
How were you and Mr. McClendon dressed? Investigator McClendon dressed?
In casual attire.
Did you have your service weapons?
No.
In your interactions with Miss Black, did you threaten her in any way?
No, ma'am.
Did you make her any promises?
No.
Did you attempt to make her feel uncomfortable or intimidate her?
No.
How did you go about requesting an interview with Miss Black?
So our initial purpose was to execute the search warrant for her DNA. We introduced ourselves and explained that we had some questions for her. However, prior to asking her any questions, we made sure she was aware of her Miranda rights.
And how do you do that?
It's a formal written rights that she would initial, that she understands at the end of the Miranda rights. She's asked a question. Having those rights in mind, does she wish to talk to us at this time? She would initial yes or no, and then we would witness it.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing you Exhibit 67. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
This is the same Miranda form that was presented to Ms. Black, the same ones with her initials next to them, and her indicating yes, understanding the rights listed above, she wished to talk at this time.
And did you yourself read this form to Ms. Black?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And witness her signing it?
I did.
And is that your signature accompanying her signature?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time state 167 in evidence.
Any objection?
Okay.
It's submitted. And then Exhibit 68, do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
This appears to be the DVD recording of the interview that was taken with Ms. Black in Phoenix, Arizona.
And is it a true and correct copy?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, state 168 into evidence, Your Honor.
68, any objection? Okay. Go on to 67?
Yes.
Okay, just make sure we're counting. All right, they're both admitted. How long is the statement?
It's a little over an hour.
Okay. Are you ready to do that now? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
You guys good? We're gonna listen to the defendant's interview. It's gonna be about an hour. We can break for lunch either now or do it. I want to do it in the middle. So you're gonna keep going. All right. You do speaks first. Okay, keep going. Yes, while we're getting that set up.
And Your Honor, the defense and I have reviewed use of the transcript.
I saw that.
Interview is playing.
Okay. Diane needs to take a quick comfort break. So why don't you go ahead and get the transcript ready and cue up the audio. We're gonna take a 5-minute comfort break and then we'll get started. Okay. Thank you. Everyone, you break. Says. It is the recording and not the transcript that constitutes the evidence of the statement. You all must determine for yourself what was said on the tape recording. If you cannot understand the content of the tape recording, you are to ignore the corresponding transcript portions of the recording. Any discrepancies between the tape recording and the transcript are to be resolved in favor of the audio tape. So in other words, if you hear the word coffee and the transcript says cafe, coffee is the evidence, not what the transcript says cafe. That's an example I can think of on the fly. Okay. All right.
Permission to publish.
Go ahead.
Now, Lieutenant, quickly, who is this in the interview?
That is Ms. Teresa Black.
And do you recall about how long she'd been waiting?
I'll estimate 15, 20 minutes tops.
Lieutenant, quickly, who are we seeing in the room with Ms. Black at this point?
That is the back of my head, ma'am.
Your head? It's better be. Ready? This is investigative plan. We're talking about it.
And the second person just entered the room, investigator Clifton, is that again?
That's investigating claim
With,
with the district attorney's office.
Where are you staying right now? Okay.
I live in February,
Okay. Where you live?
my daughter,
How old is she?
she doesn't,
Okay. Are you staying with you at all?
no, I used to go to the daughter.
Nathan?
Yeah.
What's your last name?
Washington.
Okay. We're talking about Nathan. Okay.
Okay.
Don't tell me where Black could be, right? I know you're in a room that's scary and everything like that. That's what you like, okay? Were you about to police car?
It wasn't an actual police car, but it was some of the vehicle in the car.
Okay. Did you have handcuffs on?
Yes.
Okay. Because you have handcuffs on, I'm going to go through your arrest, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to read every word to you. And we're going to go through it. If you have any questions, I want you to stop me. I want you to ask, okay? First, you're going to can you read my English?
Yeah.
If you can, I need you to initial, you can read the right English. Right. I will judge your initials. The next line says that you are not unable to judge or alcohol. Are you unable to say that?
Yeah.
Initial. What is the highest level of education you have?
I got my GED, some college with anymore.
Just initial here from GED. Very good. All right, I'm going to read from here to here, and I'm going to stop, okay? If you're saying the right, see the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court of law. The right not to a lawyer and have your present with you while you are being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed representative before questioning if you wish. You may exercise your right to not answer any questions or make any statements. I need you to initial from here to here that I read it to you, okay? All right, next line says, I read my rights, understand each one that you have. No? Okay, that's right. Understanding the rights listed above, you wish to this time. You need to initial yes or no. All right, can you just sign here? One time you got hands, I'll bring it closer. Okay.
why is Ms. Black having difficulty using her right hand?
And I'm looking at that as well. I don't recall if they're set up, if she is handcuffed one of her hands, or if she has an injury. I don't recall, but I'm seeing that as well.
You don't have any independent recollection?
I don't recall.
All right, spell your first name for me.
T-E-R, E-S-N.
Last name.
E-L-A-C-K.
Any middle name?
Baby. E-I-L-Y.
What's your date of birth?
2011, 1971.
About how tall are you?
4'11".
About what you weigh? And your address again?
2443 East Mobile Lane, Harmon 201, St. Thomas, 85041.
I know when you got brought up, you remember that.
Yeah.
What's that phone number?
What was that?
That was her cell phone ring.
491 3219.
All right, today is the 15th. So approximately 10:45. We're at Phoenix Police Headquarters. You said you live with your daughter.
Yes.
What's her name?
Nakaya. N-A-K-A-I. Middle initial L.
And you said she's 17. Where she go to school at?
She does job online.
Okay. And we already talked. So you and Nathan broke up like a year ago, you said?
Well, we broke up a couple years ago.
Still kicking it, everything?
We're really good close because he was there for a long time. He's pretty much 20 years.
That's what I was going to ask you, but he's not the father of the okay. What's Nathan's last name?
Washington.
Okay. And I'm not going to be right the whole time. We can talk a little more comfortable. I just want to remember that. Okay, so where's Nathan staying at?
He lives on 51st Avenue.
Is it apartment complex? Where's the house?
It's an apartment complex. I'm trying to think of it. It's ties on 51st. They used to be in a complex, but it was over ties on 51st. The name of the complex.
And who stays at that house?
Just here.
Just how old is Nathan?
45.
Yeah.
45.
Okay. Is your daughter hang out with him? Or does she go over there at all?
Yeah.
She knows, okay.
Yeah, she's working on the weekend or she does online schooling. She ends up over there. I'll see what she ends up on.
Okay. Any other nephews, cousins, or anybody from over the house?
No, but we don't have any of them here.
Okay. Where did you live before Mobile Lane?
I lived on East Chicken, 128 East Chicken.
Phoenix as well?
Yes. Same zip code, everything.
Okay.
That's probably number one. That was actually the apartment. We moved in very well.
And how long did you guys live there? So you and Nathan live together at this place?
Yeah, well, he lived there and then just prior to my place, so we moved there with him for a few months. He lived there for a couple of years. I think Nick, I lived there maybe 6 months.
How long was that?
That was
About?
that had to be over 3 years. I've been in my apartment for 2 years.
Like 10 years.
Yeah,
Okay. And then where before that?
but then, first apartment was Esteban Park, 3211, I believe, is the complex address. 32nd Street, brought to Broadway. So. I don't know which apartment I lived in.
About what year was that? I'm just trying to get history of where you lived while you weren't there or something.
That had to be. That was about 5 years.
Okay.
I guess so.
15-ish. And was that the first place you lived at in Arizona?
Yes.
Okay. And where were you before that?
In Alaska.
Alaska, give or take, right?
Yes.
Okay, where before Alaska?
North Carolina.
How long were you in North Carolina for?
That's where I was born.
Okay, born there. Any other states you live in?
Other South Carolina, around.
Okay. You have kids? So earlier, when I thought quickly, that's true. You're not from Phoenix, Police Department. We are from DeKalb County, Georgia, Police Department. Do you ever live in Georgia?
I did live in Carolina.
Your heart just started racing a little bit.
Oh.
Where in Georgia did you live? Where do you live in Decatur?
Well, I did have a child. I did not yet. But I moved down there with me.
Okay. How old is your kid?
6.
6. Where's he at?
I have not had any contact with him in a long time.
Do you go to like Department of Children and Families with a family member?
No, I didn't have a family member. I was in a homeless shelter for a while, and somebody down there let me stay with her, and I wasn't able to take care of him. And so she said that she would take care of him until I was able to get myself together and be able to take care of him.
So when's the last time you heard from him?
Had been maybe a year or so after I left. Left from Georgia. I went back to Charlotte, trying to job, and it was about a year after that.
What's his name? How old is he?
Almost 7. There's something wrong with her.
Did you ever, talk about him?
I didn't talk to him. No, like that.
Who's his dad?
Dad never really been in life.
Okay. Have you talked to his dad at all?
I have no idea where he could be or anything else. Actually, never really.
Remember saying?
His name's William Dashawn.
Okay. So, do you remember what area you lived in?
I do not.
Okay. Was apartment complex a house?
I never did actually have my own place there. I was supposed to be in the shelter.
Here's what I'm gonna be real with you. I went through a timeline of where you lived out all the way back. We got all the way through to North Carolina. I said, did you live anywhere else? You said, no, you were born in North Carolina.
That's what I'm
I get it. But you left out Atlanta until you came out from Atlanta. And then you took, I know I did that. I know where you, so you believe, I want you to look me in the face, and I want you to tell me that you believe that right now you have a 30-ish-year-old son named William. You believe that?
Do I believe that?
Yeah.
Yes.
You believe that?
Yes. What do you mean do I believe that?
Because I don't.
You don't believe I have a, I don't understand. You don't believe I have a son?
Well, it's kind of important, like where the kid live out. Can you know, like you remember the street or anything like that?
I don't.
This is about 1999-ish.
I don't remember.
Clinton was Candler, Chris, Fletchel, Clifton Church,
I don't.
Memorial.
I don't remember. It was a long time. I don't remember any of the streets.
So the last thing you remember is you left him with some female homeless shelter. And remember her name?
Trisha, I don't remember her last name.
Trisha. So do you remember the female named Ava? Yeah.
I don't think so.
Think hard. I know we're talking about years ago, so take your time.
Georgia? No.
Well, kind of North Carolina.
I didn't know someone in North Carolina. Yeah, in Charlotte.
Okay. Do you remember, I don't expect you to, I'm gonna ask, do you remember a conversation when Ava asked you, hey, so where's William? And you said you would stay with his father's parents, his grandparents on his father's side.
Not specifically, but I do remember her asking where he was, and I didn't tell her that I.
Well, his father's parents at that time were deceased, so there's no way he could have stayed with his father's parents.
I know that.
So we talked to his father. We met with his father. And I know time for talking, you're difficult to write back in. I'm not judging you. I'm not. I need you to be real with people. It's very important. Okay? Life changes from. I need you to be very specific with me because if something happened back when you were a young single mother and you got scared or anything like that, I need you to tell me. Because I know where William is, and I think you do.
I don't. You know what it is? Of course, I did not do the right thing. I know that I shouldn't have left him.
That is what.
I want
He died in 1999.
What? No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. His bones were found.
No. No. No.
It was actually about 18 years to discover whose bones they were. So what we did was we went and met William Sr. and we took a DNA sample from William Sr. to compare against the bones that were found in this field. It comes back to high probability. We've done a lot of homework since then, which brought us to Phoenix, right? What we're going to ask you is to consent to DNA to prove that the identified young male is your son. Now, to be honest with you, Teresa, how to talk back 99, you're a young single female. I'm not buying that you left your 7-year-old with some unknown female. I'm not buying.
So you think that I did
No,
something to
I
him?
don't. I absolutely don't, sir. I absolutely don't. But I do think something happened. I think he became ill. I have his school records, immunization records, birth certificate. There's never been a report made of a missing person. I think something unfortunate happened, that you were scared. I'm not saying you killed anybody. This ain't 1994. But I think something happened and you panicked and left Georgia. That's what I think. It's more than just you being up tough times at a shelter and giving your 6 or 7-year-old son to a stranger. That didn't happen. Teresa, look.
I would never. I know I should have left him, but I would never hurt him.
I never said you did. Don't say he's murdered.
This is John Doe. Isn't that what that means?
No, it's because we didn't have a name for years.
Oh my God. Okay. So the first, I'm confused.
Ask me a question.
Okay, you talked to his father, and he goes in that it's a match.
Yes.
Okay.
But we don't have both biological parents. It's not a, so William, his father, it is like a 1 in 50 million chance that he's not the father. But 1 in 50 million isn't enough to say that 100%. Now, I know 99.99999% yes. So what we're going to ask is for your DNA to confirm that it was 100% that, because we have DNA samples from both biological parents to compare against DNA from his bones. I know it will be a match, but I have to, it's something serious. You can't just guess, right?
Right.
So that's what Ross stands. And we want to hear what story you got. And I'm hearing your story.
And you don't believe me?
I mostly do. But in my mind, I feel like in the last 22-ish years since 1999, that you dreaded that this day might come where you would have to answer some questions as far as where your son is. I don't believe that you left your son with a stranger at home here. I don't. We've done this together for a long time, 1,000 times. I'm not judging you. I'm not mad at you. I respect you. Everyone has a story. I need a real story. A lot of time and effort. So look, this came from the National Centers for Missing Children, okay, in Washington, D.C. There has been years of work to prove who this child is, 7-year-old child that bones were found, okay? It's a big media thing. It's a big social media following. I don't accept, I'm not always right, but I don't accept the, time for tough, and I was in a shelter for a while, I just gave my 7-year-old to a stranger. And we can debate the definition of a stranger, that's not what we do today too. But I need a real story. Because I'm not giving you the whole story. Like, I can't show you all my cards, I'm giving you pieces of the puzzle, but there are things that I know about your son that I'm not going to
we start? Because I had done what I would have done that to help. And so I said, well, there's a place to start over, and be a full-time job. And it didn't turn out that way.
Right out of Georgia. You take a bus. Where'd you go to the bus?
Was, and I think I found, all the places where you can ask for shelters and stuff on, and got information. Well, I don't tell first. I had a place there for, I think, a couple weeks, and money ran out really quick, and I found, information about the shelters that were downtown.
How long do you think you were in Georgia total? Like how many months?
I don't remember. I don't remember how long.
Was it wintertime, summertime?
It wasn't cold, I think it's winter. It wasn't really cold.
Have you ever told anybody else that you had a child and you, whatever your version of the story might have been, did you tell anybody else that?
Well, if people know that I had a child, if people had a child, and I didn't want to tell them nothing, so I didn't tell them that he went to state, but no, family.
You told the state no?
No.
When was the last time you told them that?
I mean, years.
Like you was able to see your son at least once, I think, right? That's how right?
Like it was very, very.
Like 2 or 3?
Very, very little, yeah. And I haven't been in contact with him.
So we never reached out to you and say, where's the kid?
No, I haven't talked to him at all.
That's not what he says. I'm just letting you know, I'm not saying it's true, just throwing it out there.
So you didn't reach out to him for, when you were, say you were leaving it with the lady at the homeless shelter?
Did I reach out to his dad?
Yeah, to say, hey,
No, but he had never done anything. So I knew he wouldn't be able to do anything.
But I just think he would get first dibs. You know, hey, look, I'm going through my own thing. I'm not able to care for the child. Do you want to take care of him? It's like your act together. Like, I would think he would get first dibs before some shit at home shelter. That's just my thought. Oh, yeah, I get it. Like I said, I was in your shoes back then. I'm not judging. So did you ever actually live in an apartment or a house with roommates at any point when you were in Georgia?
I never had my own place to rent in place. I stayed the shelters mostly, another lady I not met. She worked at a club. I stayed at her house for a couple months, but I never really had my own place like that. Or any roommates that I lived with as far as like signing and stuff like that.
I'm not looking for, like, I don't technically, you might be police, but did you like be friends with somebody that said, hey, you can crash my place for a while, or something like that?
No, I'm just the lady that I work with, like a strip club.
What's her name?
Shirley?
What's your name?
Cleveland, Pleasure, something like that.
Atlanta?
Yeah. Oh, it was Georgia. Yeah. Pleasure, something like that.
I'm like, send you DNA today? I don't know.
Does that refresh your memory at all?
Yes, ma'am, does. Her right arm is handcuffed to the table.
And was that how she was when you came into the room?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it have been local police that handcuffed her right arm to the table like that?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'll tell you, one other thing that happens in this room that I think is important is you understanding that this is the only time we're going to talk. Whatever you have to give as far as your story is today. There won't be, oh, you know what, I have to tell you A, B, and C tomorrow. Okay? We're going out drinking tonight, and we're going to be out here playing Thursday, going back to Atlanta, and we have to have a meeting with a whole lot of people. We're going to go through this story. I've been doing this long enough. I'm going to tell you what a whole lot of people are going to say. You know what they're going to say?
I don't know what
No,
you're doing.
they're going to say a little different. They're going to say trees. That's what they're saying. So, I don't know you. However, we knew that we were going to come and ask you for a sample of your DNA. Constitutionally, you have a right to decline that. So, the folks in Phoenix here, they worked with us and they got a court order signed by a judge ordering us the ability to take your DNA and do separate comparison. That DNA is going to match and this is going to be your kid. No, I know, but I would assume, just in case, right? I play worst case scenario game. And then we're going to look at the facts. The facts are you had a child, actually have a birth certificate that you signed for him. He went to school in North Carolina up until like 2nd grade, I think, maybe. And then he leaves school, he comes to Georgia, and February of 1999, his bones are discovered in a field. Now, his body had been there 4-ish months before anyone found the bones. And you, I'm just everything factually. You just go about your life. You go to Alaska, you meet Nathan, you guys come back down here, you guys have your ups and downs, he has a move out, and then we got some fight like a month ago. And nothing was brought up, there's no missing person report, there's no whatever. I believe, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna just tell you what I believe. And there's things I can't 100% disclose to you. I believe that your 7-year-old at the time became ill. I believe your son died naturally from that illness. I believe you made a poor decision. Because whatever reason, whether don't trust the police, scare the police, those are all reasonable. Don't have a family, reasonable. Not stable, reasonable. And you let it ride. Teresa, I'm gonna tell you, if I'm close, the story that I just said, it is very important that you tell me, because those are my words, not your words. And I'm gonna tell you, Teresa, I have a family, he has a family, and kids change the dynamics of family. Okay? They do. Teresa, I believe that you knew today was gonna come someday. It's like little things. Oh, all I am. Come in. All I am. Tell me what happened. It's just us in this room. And I know you can hurt your kid. I know. I know things I can't tell you. I just can't tell you what I know.
Oh my God. I didn't tell you.
I know.
I know that something was, I know that I wasn't able to feed him right, we were eating, and we weren't even at the shelters there, we were trying to speak about like the bitches and to where we could just find a place that was out, you know, and the park or wherever. I want, he started, I think we want to talk, we want to get up and I didn't know what to do. Because I figured, okay, he's just really hungry. I gotta find something to eat. And so I was trying to find something to eat. That didn't seem to help much. He was just eating kind of, they don't want to do anything. And so we ate stuff. I was careful with it, and I was like, okay, I can find something. We can do this. And I was like, yeah, just a few ways, and I'll find somebody to help us. And we got some this week, like in parks, we had time to stuff. And then we lay down for the night, and it wasn't a park, it was like the woods, or there was wood trees and stuff, that was away from the road. And we lay down, and when I woke up, he didn't wake up. He didn't wake up. And I didn't know what to do. So I sat there for a couple of days and I didn't know what to do. Because I didn't know what was wrong. I thought it was just that he wasn't eating enough. But I didn't expect that to happen. So I was going to try and do what I could. And I didn't know what to do.
Do you remember, I don't want to interrupt you. Do you remember, did he have like a cough or anything? Or did you give him cough syrup or anything? Do you remember? Try to make him feel better?
He was not throwing up, like gagging. So I gave him, I don't remember what it was. It wasn't liquid, it was like a lozenge. And I think I gave him that. I don't know if I had cough syrup. I tried to give him whatever I could to stop. I didn't know what was wrong with him.
Did you ever call 911 or anything for ambulance?
I did. He said that his eyes were so wrong, and I should have done it.
I'm just asking, Teresa. I'm just asking. I'm trying to help. I'm just asking. So he didn't wake up. Did you leave him there? Did you move him at all? Bury him at all?
No. I don't want to bury him.
How old are you?
I thought people would have thought that I something heard of it, and I kept trying to say that I needed to do that. It was about something. I need to say something, and then I didn't.
Do you remember what she was?
A little something close, like, yeah. Oh,
Do you believe like he was suffering from, malnourishment?
I think that's what it was. I mean, I wasn't seeing him. We weren't able to eat very much or drink water, but I don't know exactly what was wrong.
What was his symptoms? What was coughing, sore throat, say he had a headache, what kind of stuff? Just lethargic, weak, tired.
Yeah.
Have you told anybody else? Does your daughter know? I mean, I'm not saying the whole story, but does she know? She wasn't born yet. Does she know? Does she think she might have a sibling out there? It's kind of probably a better question.
I couldn't tell her.
Okay. Take a deep breath. We're gonna take a break for a minute, and we're gonna come back with some Q-tips, okay? And we're gonna swab just the inside of your cheek. Ask me a question. You're gonna go home when we're done today.
It's gonna be my question.
I know.
It's gonna be questions. So, do I wait to hear from, like you said, you guys have to go back and do I wait to hear from someone from there or what?
Teresa, tomorrow's the day.
It's been a nightmare for so long.
Because what you're living with, the regret and everything that's been weighing on you, I'm no judge, I'm no jury, but that's probably enough. Now we'll present, we'll go back to work and we'll present everything and, I don't know what lie to you, I don't know, but it ain't murder. But we'll have a good phone number for you, we'll be in touch. Confident that if we call you, answer the phone. We should by late next week get the results, and we'll confirm with you what those results are as far as the DNA, okay?
Okay.
But I mean, we know. Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
Just got a couple more. I'm taking down this spot. It's in the woods.
Yeah, it was like a little bit, it was like off of the main road. I don't remember a cemetery being, you said it was down by the cemetery. I don't remember a cemetery being by there, but it was a long time ago, so I don't know. I didn't
just I want to let you know that we did go through this. Right? Hold on. Okay. This is my daughter. Please help me. Please help me. Come on, what's your story? I'm gonna call you out. All this is that we're in a swap inside chief. That's it. It's not called test. We're keeping any problem. Not like that. I'll put it on. Okay. No, and no, I'm not saying that you're holding that. No, you're not. I'm not. You're saying, I'm even that here. It's not no, I'm not. So, you guys pick them. Touch right here. I'm doing this information. That's what's going to go inside this. Do I need with you?
No. I told the gentleman that you guys have my modification.
So what we're doing is we're going to send one of these samples to the National Center for Missing Exploited Teens, only because they have a picture around it. So I'm going to send one also to your investigation just for Valley, but they take 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months. I'm going to leave you the card. When we leave, it has my phone number. If you change your address, change your phone number, you can call me. Because I expect you to change that phone if I call you. Is that fair? Gentlemen. questions, Teresa?
What was this? Do I need to give my ID to someone?
So you got Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. What was your Really? I don't believe in that, but it's cold. Like for real cold. I Minnesota. Like that close to Canada. And that's cold. No. But it's like 14, yeah, 14, pretty much 14 Arizona, right?
No.
Not really. At this point.
No. Yeah, this is what they call it.
You're one by a building camp.
Yes, that's my middle name. My name is Teresa Ann Black. When I got married, Teresa Ann Black. Teresa Ann Black.
Okay, what? You go. Okay.
Teresa Ann Black.
Okay.
So it's my baby's name.
Okay, so, okay. Okay. You want to take a flight off?
Yeah.
That's fine. You understand? Right there. Thank you. So, maybe not recent, but like 5 years later, we worry about this day. Someday, you know how to play out.
Always. Right. Always.
You'll be with them. Go ahead. Okay. I mean, as far as, you know, in your mind, I don't know, you might want to find someone to talk to, maybe some counseling. I don't know how this affected you, but as far as looking over your shoulder, worrying about your freedom, right now, be a mom to your daughter. Okay?
wasn't gonna find her. I had to say something. And then I didn't. It got to a point where I was like, if I say something now, that's kind of like I did something wrong. And I guess, like you said, I just been waiting for somebody to come and find me. And I know I should have said something. I know I should have a lot of things different.
You were young. You know better. And you survived.
It hasn't been easy. But I guess
We're leaving, so
ex-boyfriend, he was actually ex-boyfriend. He was
talking and all that kind of stuff.
not really, his son, I guess, dated somebody else died, but he was still the same way, with me when I would see him, and then, yeah, and then my brother gave me a gun, because we'd be in a band, we all got into a drink or something like that.
We good? Yes. All right, is it almost done?
Yes.
We still have a little bit more of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a little.
All right, it is a little before 2. Be back, does 45 minutes give y'all enough time? All right, try to be back by 2:30, 2:45, and same instructions remain in place. Leave the transcripts on your chairs. Thank you.
All right, guys. So we are on break. So we will be back about. It looks like 2:45 is when we'll be back with live coverage of the trial. So we'll be back about 3 o'clock. So you saw there, to recap what we saw. We basically saw a hearing on the toxicology aspect, which is going to be very important because it's the use of drugs, potentially, or drugs that she allegedly gave him, which are the weapon, or is the weapon that was alleged to be used to kill him. So it'll be whether or not what she gave him rises to the level of abuse, or whether or not she was being a, well, we're not going to say responsible parent, but being a parent thinking she was doing the best she could and then made a bad decision post-mortem. It's a huge, huge difference on how this outcome ends up for her, because if they believe that she was an abusive parent who killed her kid, she's going away for a long time. If it's simply her actions after she realizes he's passed away, she's probably going to get some jail time, but it's not going to be as significant as it would have been had she been responsible for the actual death itself. Anyways, that was what we heard there. It looks like the judge is deferring a ruling on that, whether or not that evidence is going to be able to come in by the state. And then we saw a forensic anthropologist who was helping to talk about how they identified the remains so that they can say, that was tying in who the victim is. And then we just saw the interrogation here, and we have the testimony of the investigator. Now, one of the things you should have noticed if you were watching this entire interrogation is the investigator himself said, listen, I don't think you killed him. I think this was a situation where you wake up, he's dead, and you made a bad decision. The defense, and I haven't covered live on the channel yet the openings, but if you have watched the openings or you go back and watch them before I played them, that this is a big part of the defense is the investigators themselves did not look at this case as a murder and did not look at this situation as her causing the death. They looked at it as she was making a bad decision post-mortem, leaving the child behind, and that was the approach, and that was what they had talked with her about originally. So we saw that live time. We saw that being discussed. That was a big point. We'll see how the defense jumps on that when they cross-examine her after break. So anyways, all that's coming up after break. We're going to end the stream. I'll be back at 3 p.m. And we will jump in here and keep watching justice unfold. Until then, guys, I will talk to you later and let justice prevail.